Well, welcome back to the channel, everybody. It's Nicola Cairncross here, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back for a second time my business mentor, Greg. We're going to cover a lot in this episode, and if you're a business owner, you can't afford to miss this because we're going to be talking not only about existing business owners, but what business owners need to watch out for in the next 6 months or so. Without being doom and gloom about it, there is a bit of a whirlwind coming, and he gives some very sound advice about how to make sure that your business survives and thrives over the next year or two. So let's get into it, shall we? Okay, well, welcome back, Greg. I'm delighted you decided to join me again, and you got some great comments after the last session, so I'm looking forward to this one. What should we talk about today? I thought we could talk about property initially, because I've just had that call with a client who was asking me about what to do about our property situation. And you're an
Yeah,
experienced property investor, aren't you?
yeah, property is a difficult one. The problem is that depending on your viewpoint, the way it's sold to us is that property is one big thing. Rightmove said last month property went up by 1.6%, and it's just crazy because it makes everybody think wherever they're living in the UK that their house went up by 1.6% last month. And of course, on average, that's what they're doing, but it doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't help anybody because everybody's in a different environment. So even within a town, you can have property markets within property markets within property markets. I mean, just a road can be a property market of itself, and you hear people say things like, oh, well, Dave and Sharon just sold their house for 400,000, but of course they got that much for it because it's in that road, because people pay more for exactly the same house in a different road. But generally speaking, I think if you're a property investor, you need to be giving some serious thought to how bulletproof your portfolio or your one investment or two or three properties is. And that's because there's a lot of changes coming. I mean, personally, I'm selling out of a lot of property because of my time of life. But also, I don't think it's good news for long-term for property investors. I think the government are clamping down more and more and more. There's probably going to be rent controls coming in. And the legislation, the taxation, the rules and regulations, everything's on the tenant's side. Instead of it being a level playing field, it's very much biased against the landlord. And the landlords are depicted as being evil people, when in fact, in my experience, nearly 25 years of property investing, most landlords are really nice people who look after their tenants.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very difficult time, and it also depends on where you are in your life, how old you are, and how much of your money you want to invest. But it's a very turbulent time, and the market's definitely tightening.
Yeah, when I wrote the Money Gym book back in 2006, I think it first came out, and then I rewrote it in 2010 because, of course, we were just in the middle of a global economic crisis at the time. The situation was that a lot of people were buying one or two extra properties just to try and secure their future, their pensions, so that they could then keep one, live in one, keep one for rent, and sell one to pay off all the mortgages on the three. And that was that would have been really good because they wouldn't have had any dependency on the government, and they'd have been completely self-secure. And then, of course, the first thing that happened was the government changed the tax relief on interest payments, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was the first thing. And then just recently they've also, what's that thing that's just come in or was just about to come in, where you can't give notice to a tenant unless they've been really bad and broken the terms of their tenancy agreement, which
Yeah,
means
that hasn't actually come in yet, but that's what they're talking about. They're talking about you've got to have a good reason to get rid of tenants. The thing is it all goes back down to a lot of what's going on in the world with this whole sorry to say it, but it's a lot to do with this woke agenda, which is that everybody has the right to everything all the time.
yeah,
So
even if they don't actually deserve it.
yeah, exactly. And the whole idea of stopping tenants being evicted from properties, most of the time, tenants are asked to leave properties because they're either a bad tenant or because the landlord is going to sell the property. it's not in a landlord's interest. He doesn't sit there one night watching the TV, turn to his wife or husband and say, do you know what? Should we get rid of those tenants out of that property? For no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time, there's a very good reason to get rid of. But it's like that. It's like that program you see on the TV about bad tenants and bad landlords, and I've tried watching some of those just to see what it's about. But of course, they take the most extreme cases.
Yes.
There's 27 people from this foreign country living in this one-bedroom flat, and it's like, well, come on, how often does that happen? So I think in general, if you're thinking of getting into property, it's got to be a 15 to 20-year plan from now. I don't think you're going to have an easy ride in the next 10 years. And I also think that the market is tightening, and you're probably going to get cheaper properties in the coming 2 or 3 years than you're going to pay now. It's all about where to place your money, a bit like we spoke about before. People need to be more mechanical about business and less emotional about business. If you've got a passion for something and you want to do that as your business, then you need to decide on whether it is viable as a business or whether it's a hobby, because there's no point in trying to force something to make money that's not going to work, because that just leads to disappointment, frustration, and a general feeling of being down. If you get into a business because it works mechanically and you're passionate about it, great.
But there's differences, isn't there? I mean, because you work at a different level than I do. You work with bigger businesses when you do work, and no offense, but I tend to work with people who are knowledge workers who are working with expertise and things, and they're trying to get it off the ground. And they're often not very experienced business people. So I'm all about helping them test out the markets, bring their product and offer to market, how to market themselves at all, because a lot of my clients don't know how to do any marketing. But the kind of businesses you work with are generally in a proven business model, aren't they? And they've got, manufacturing and all they're a lot more higher level. What 1 to 10 million turnover? Would you say?
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't work with big businesses as such. I'm not
not a corporate character.
No. But I work with people that are where I used to be, which is that you're running a business between sort of 1 and 10 million turnover, and you've got employees and you've got premises and you've got commitments, and you're trying to do the best you can. But it is a wood for the trees thing, and a lot of the time you're making bad decisions because you're not thinking things through, and you're not thinking things through because it's so busy, and it's so busy because you're not really in control of it. And I've got an analogy I use with people when I first meet them and I'm first introduced to them, which is the guys you're trying to get, those London double-decker buses with the open back with the silver pole that you climb on the bus.
I used to love those. Number 23 to Notting Hill.
They used to have those in Brighton, actually, funnily enough, when I was a kid. And
wow.
So if you imagine that there's a bus leaving the bus stop and you're running for the bus, and you run like crazy, and you just can't quite get your fingertips on that silver pole to get a grasp and jump on the bus in time before the bus pulls away.
Yeah.
And you stand there bent over with your hands on your knees, puffing and panting out of breath, really disappointed that you didn't get on the bus. And then you notice a few hundred yards ahead, the bus indicating to pull over at the next stop.
Oh.
So you think, right, this time I'm going to get on it. So you run after this bus, and the same thing happens at the next bus stop. And that is like running a business. Is that you want to get there, you really want to get there. And what you really want to do is you want to climb on the bus, walk to the front of the bus, get in the driver's seat and drive the business from the front. But a lot of the time we're chasing after ourselves, in effect. And
is that because the business owners I work with tend to make bad decisions because they haven't got any money, so they're always trying to do something on the cheap. Whereas, what are the recurring themes that you see with the businesses you work with that they're doing? What's making them make bad decisions?
Well, a lot of the time, most of the decisions they're making wrong are decisions they're making based on how they feel. Not based on what actually the business requires.
God,
So if you always make a decision the best decision for the business without any emotion in it, then your business will be more successful. So let's take somebody who, I'm just going to get, I mean, there's so many examples. So let's give you an example of, your mother-in-law or your husband's cousin or somebody works at the company, but basically they're not very good at what they do. Then you avoid the pain of disciplining them, or you avoid the pain of making them redundant or sacking them or taking them down that road for the long-term good of the business, because you don't want to go through the short-term pain that will cause in the family. When in fact, the best thing that you could do is to get rid of them. I don't mean get rid of them in an unpleasant way, but removing them from the business would mean you could get somebody in who would be more productive. But that emotional, I don't want to face that pain of getting rid of them, is an example of how we make bad decisions. And of course, that employee that's the wrong person, and it doesn't have to be a member of your family, don't get me wrong, but that employee that's the wrong person, actually, you'd be doing them a favor by putting them into a different job, helping them find a new job that would be more suitable for them, giving them a glowing reference in as much as talking about their attributes in the reference, because it turns out that the job they're doing for you, they're not really the right person. So long term, you're better off, and long term, they're better off. But most of the time, people avoid pain. And we all do it in life, don't we? We all do it about everything, and the people that don't get up in the morning at 5 o'clock and run 10 miles, and I'm one of those, you're doing that because you don't really want the pain of getting out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning and going running. The people that do get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go running, they have all the benefits of going through that bit of pain at 5 o'clock in the morning. So running a business is about making non-emotional decisions.
How do you do that though, Greg? I think I've got better, and I've certainly got a lot better with your support, but how do you learn how to be unemotional in business?
Well, you can get somebody to, like you, to look at the business for you. It's really easy. I mean, people say to me, "Oh, don't be stupid. Not all businesses are the same." But in my eyes, all businesses are the same. They've all got or haven't got systems and procedures that are required. There's a process you take the customer through, whether you're delivering products and or services. So it's all about refining that process and making that process work best for the business. So if you look at McDonald's, is obviously a perfect example. What happens with McDonald's? Well, you do what they tell you, don't you? You join this queue in your car, you speak into that speaker, you tell them what you want, then you pay, then they give you your stuff at the window and you drive off. Or you go into there and you choose what you want, then you pay, then there's a process they put you through. Big supermarkets are the same, you don't get to the till and say, yeah, send me a bill and I'll settle it in 30 days. Yeah. You don't leave the premises without. So it's about having another voice that's not in the woods for the trees situation. So the sort of people you're talking about, if I was going to open a small business, I'd sit down with different people and ask their opinion on, is this going to work? Is this a hobby or is this a business? Because it might be that the business that you want to do isn't going to work, but there's another business you could do that would work, which would enable you to do the business you want to do without making any money. If something else gives you the income. But there's no point in trying to get something that isn't going to give you an income because it's not going to work, is it? Because it's a mechanical thing.
Sometimes it's because sometimes things stop working. And when you look at why they've stopped working, it's because the person stopped doing the things that made it work the other time. And that's all about emotion, isn't it?
Yeah, but most people that want to start a business, they know everything about why they want to start a business, but they don't know about how to run a business. So, sitting down with somebody like yourself for a couple of hours, spending a little bit of money on finding out whether this business can work can save you thousands and thousands. And it can save you thousands of hours of pain as well, and lots of sleepless nights, because you can avoid a lot of problems right at the start. Whereas the people that go, when I went into business with the attitude of, well, I don't need to know how this works. I'll work it out as I go.
Yeah. Well, that's what we all had to do in the
Which
beginning.
is crazy. Yeah.
Whereas if we'd sat down with someone if we'd gone and found someone who'd been successful in the kind of business we wanted to start and talked to them, they would have saved us all the pain and all the time and all the money that we spent making the mistakes. It's like if someone comes to me and says, I want to write an ebook about this. Or I want to set up a course teaching people how to do that. I mean, because I've seen so many different kinds of businesses over the years, and you've seen so many different manufacturing businesses and retail businesses, you sort of get a feel for it after a while, but you don't have that feel for it at the beginning, do you?
There's certain basics in certain industries. It's like a restaurant. If I've never opened a restaurant, but let's just say I opened a restaurant.
You were always saying you're going to buy the restaurants we go to for lunch when we go to them.
Yeah, we'll see. But I wouldn't open that restaurant on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. I'd open it Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday and Sunday lunchtime, Saturday and Sunday. Well, maybe not Sunday evening, but what it is we open the restaurant 7 days and nights a week because we want to be available to all our customers.
Yes.
But when you've got a loyal following, you can reduce the hours because people will adapt to you.
Well, you're right.
People will say, well, we like, I don't know, I'm making it up, Lucio's. We love that restaurant, but he's only open on a Thursday, Friday and Saturday night. So guess what? We're going to go there Thursday, Friday or Saturday night.
Well, that's what Chambers next to me, Chambers Bistro in Shoreham High Street have done. They obviously couldn't afford to stay open all the time when there's hardly any people in there. But now if you go in there on a Thursday, I think it's Wednesday night they open, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday lunchtime, they're ram-jammed because people are adapting.
Yeah, so it's a bit like turning around to all your customers and saying, look, I'll tell you what, you couldn't do us a favour, could you? Instead of scattering yourself around all week, so we have to employ people every night.
Yeah, standing there doing
show up on the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and they'll go, "Yeah, no problem, we'll do that."
Well, that's so true because when people go, that's why I love using an online diary, because if you speak to someone and they want to talk to you and you say, well, when can you do that? Well, they'll give you some random time like 3:45 on Tuesday morning or something. I don't know, but if you use an online diary, it corrals people into the times you want. And interestingly, I was just talking to, I did a marketing review for Wendy's Cafe in Sunderland recently. I don't know if you know this, but she was telling me, she's got a wide range of menu and she's got a great loyal base of customers. And she's open from 8 in the morning through to 4:30 in the afternoon. And I'm trying to help her find things to put on in the evenings. But I was listening to James Sinclair today, who's an entrepreneur I follow on YouTube, and he's got several restaurants. And he said the thing is that you make your profit when there's least people in the kitchen. So the times when coffees and cakes and toasted sandwiches are your most profitable times because you don't have all the chefs in the kitchen. And again, because he's open, he's analysed it really, really carefully, and he realises that the less time you're open as a restaurant, the more profitable you are.
Yeah, and it's the same with the manufacturing. When we had the manufacturing business, if we could have run it 24 hours a day and we were able to manufacture twice as many products as we were manufacturing, our rent halves, our rates halve, our admin staff in effect halves because they're only there 8 hours a day, but we're open 24 hours a day. So it costs us a third of, so you spread the cost. And the same with the restaurant. If you're only open, say Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you're only paying people's wages 3 days. Now, the thing is if you've got 7 days of trade in those 3 days, because you've concentrated all your customers into those 3 days, you're saving yourself the cost of those staff for the other 4 days, aren't you?
And that's often the biggest overhead in business, isn't it?
Well, this is another thing, isn't it? It's another thing, which is another problem with being a business in this country, is the huge costs of employers' NI, the tax and NI situation, and the rights that employees get. If you've got a bad employee, and if you imagine for a second you had 50 staff in an office and one employee is a problem, you have to take that employee through a disciplinary process. And while you're taking that employee through that disciplinary process, which can take weeks or months, that employee can spread whatever poison they want, true or not, through the other 49 employees.
Yeah.
That employee can cause problems. So it's you've got to be really tight with how you've got to run a really tight ship, depending on the size of business you've got. And like we were speaking about before, getting the business to pay for itself. Don't take on the overheads and then try and make the business work. Make the business work, run it past people like you, find out what the holes are. We used to say, if we kick a business idea to death and it's still alive and it still works, it's probably a good idea. So having people playing devil's advocate with your business idea is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. They're not out to hurt your feelings. They're just out to help you to not waste your time and money on something that isn't going to work, and help you to shape that idea and form it. And a lot of the time, people that aren't involved in your business idea will come up with ideas that you would never have thought of, which are blatantly obvious. And you think to yourself, well, hang on a second, what's going on? I spoke to somebody a few years ago, and they were running one of these networking businesses.
Yeah.
And they had 2 levels of membership. And she said to me, what do you think? I said, well, the problem is you're giving them 2 choices, aren't you? She said, well, I know, but I need to give them different choices. I said, no, you're not giving them enough choices. You need to give them 3 choices. She said, why is that? I said, because everyone will choose the one in the middle. And then she said, oh, I can't believe I've missed this.
But I learned this early on from, I used to listen to an old Zig Ziglar, a sales expert in the car. Brilliant. And I used to listen to his, what was it? You shall take you to the top. But he used to talk about this in relation to cars. We'll always show them the most expensive car, the least expensive car, then they'll buy the one in the middle.
Yeah, because it's human nature, isn't it? Because you don't want the crappiest thing, do you?
No.
But you think, well, is it really worth going for the money? We'll compromise. We'll go for the one in the middle. And if you look at car manufacturers, most of the models that they sell are the middle ground.
Yeah.
Nobody wants the basic, but then nobody thinks it's really worth the money to have the top of the range. And let's be honest about it, the top of the range, what's it got that we really need? Well, and then they talk themselves into it, themselves into buying the one in the middle. And then she went on to be more successful at the time with her networking business. And it's not that it's down to me, because loads of other people could have come up with that idea. But because I wasn't involved in the business, I could see straight away what the problem was. And that's where people like yourself add value, because somebody comes up with a business idea and you can immediately give them the 10 reasons, the 10 things they need to avoid. Because it's like walking through a minefield, isn't it? Yeah. And our job is to give people a map of where the mines are, so that they can actually go, whoa, hang on, stop, turn right here, because I'm going to get blown up.
But then the other thing is, I mean, as you were talking there about the staff and how difficult it can be having one bad apple, the government are just bringing in this legislation now, whereas if any of your staff get verbally or physically abused, you can be sued. They can sue you, not the person who verbally or physically abused them. So again, the government's making it more difficult to be a business owner, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And it's look at 0 hours contracts. So if you say to people 0 hours contracts, the first thing that people jump to most of the time is, oh yeah, well, they're bad. Oh, well, those, you shouldn't have those because you're just trying to get out of your obligations and blah, blah, blah. Well, the reality is that if you were to give your employees 0 hours contracts, you can, if you want to, pay them for sick. You can, if you want to, pay them for holiday. You can, if you want to, pay them redundancy, and you can pay them for things if you want to, but it doesn't mean that you have to. So if that employee is a bad employee and doesn't deserve those things, you don't have to pay them. That's one way of looking at it. So if you were going to engage somebody on a 0 hours contract, they might be quite happy about that, because they'd be confident that you're a decent person and you'll give them some time off every year on holiday and pay for it, and so on and so on. So a lot of stuff is painted to be worse than it is.
I've got questions. What, for the people listening and for myself, because I'm a little bit vague on this, what is a 0 hours contract? And B, wouldn't any business owner get away with the least he possibly could, he or she? So if somebody signs a 0 hours contract, would the business owner then have any incentive to be decent to the employee?
Well, yeah, but this is all about relationships, isn't it? I mean, a 0 hours contract is a contract, a standard employment contract, but you are not obligated to give them any work. So the hours that they work is zero. But when they
Right.
do work, they get X amount an hour. So it's just the same as any other employment contract. But what it means is that if you don't want to give that person work from this moment on, you don't have to, because you're contracted to 0 hours.
Why would anyone sign that then? Because it gives the employer leeway in quiet times to have less employees. I can see
Yeah,
the benefit from the
yeah.
employer's point of view, but why would an employee sign
Well,
that?
I won't mention any names, but big supermarkets are the kind of people that use 0 hours contracts, because then they can bring you in when they want to, and when they don't need you, they won't bring you in.
Yeah.
And there's lots of other companies that use 0 hours contracts. But if you think about it, it was a bit like when I had the manufacturing business. Sometimes you have to let people go, and that's because they're not very good at their job.
Yeah.
And it's nothing personal. They might be a really nice guy, or girl. But the point is that it's not working. So you've got to let them go. And I used to say to people, just remember, nobody ever lets anyone go that's super valuable to the business, do they?
No.
So if you're being asked to leave because it's not working out, then you're obviously not delivering value to the business. That doesn't mean you're not a nice person. Doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means on a business level, on a mechanical level, you're not giving us what we need. It's not worth us paying you the money because it's just not working.
Right.
So if you watch, I don't know if you ever watched Billions, have you? That
No,
series.
but I'm getting stuck into Succession now. That's quite
Okay.
interesting.
I haven't watched that. But Billions is the story of a billionaire. And it's really, really good. And if you're thinking of running a business, it's a good series to watch, because apart from being entertaining, and a general good watch, it does give you a lot of insight into how a billionaire thinks, because there's loads of stuff a billionaire doesn't think about that we think about, because they think in a different way, because money's been removed. So, most people think about how much is that going to cost. That's the first thing they think. So, if you rang up, I don't know, one of your members of your family tonight and said, let's go to a really expensive restaurant tonight, the first thing they'll think is, how much is that going to cost? Because
I think that about going to cheap restaurants.
Well, yeah. But what I'm saying is, everybody's been brainwashed into thinking that, because everybody's on a budget. But a billionaire isn't.
No.
So they don't think that. That's not a question they ask themselves. So there's a way of thinking as a business person. I'm not a billionaire. But as a business person, there's a way of thinking about things which isn't like normal people think.
Yeah.
So if you talk to any successful business person, they don't think like the majority of people think. Because if they did, they wouldn't be a successful business person.
No. And do you think that's there from the beginning, or do you think that grows with time as you get more used to being successful?
I think it depends on you. And I look back at when I started in business, which was 37 years ago, and I think to myself, I just did not have a clue. And it's quite amazing that I managed to cobble together what little success I've cobbled together. But the biggest reason I've been able to achieve, and I haven't achieved a lot, but what I have achieved, I've achieved through self-analysis. I've achieved it through learning from my mistakes. I've achieved it through looking at what I'm doing wrong and making it better, and what I'm doing right and making that better as well. So making a business successful is all about taking it apart, putting it back together again, taking it apart, putting it back together again. Once you get complacent, then it starts to go downhill. A business is either growing or it's contracting.
A bit like a shark.
Yeah. And
keep
exactly.
moving forwards.
Yeah. And people say, oh, well, we're turning over the same amount we turned over last year, so that's good. No, it's not, because it means you're doing less than you did last year.
Yeah.
And they say, well, no, we did the same. Well, no, you didn't, because you've got that thing called inflation. So you turned over less than you did last year. You can't turn over the same as you did last year and it be the same as last year, because all of your costs are increased.
You're being very self-deprecating, by the way, about your own success levels. So
but don't
be fooled, listeners. Don't be fooled.
You're going the other way. But yeah, it's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative. So it's not about what you achieve in relation to everybody else. It's about what you achieve in relation to yourself. It's like if you decided you wanted to be a runner, well, there's no point in becoming a runner if you're going to compare yourself to the best runners in the world, because you're not going to be one of the best runners in the world. So you have to compare yourself to how you're progressing and how you're improving.
Stop playing with Nicola Cairncross here, and I'd like to quickly interrupt this video. As you may or may not know, I have a business called Clicks and Leads Academy, which is not just about marketing your business better online, although we do cover that. It's also about becoming a better entrepreneur. So if you like the sound of that, you can come over to clicksandleads.academy. See you on the other side. How do business owners know what, if you're a solopreneur or you're a business owner and you've got, say, 3 people in your team who aren't interested in the management of the business at all, how would you recommend that people measure themselves? Would you have like a meeting with yourself once a quarter and work out what the turnover and the profit and all that stuff is, or how would you go about it?
And the thing is, I'm not recommending this path because it's something that you and I do. I'm recommending this path because this is the path I think people should go down. I think the first thing they need to do is to get somebody to look at their business and tell them what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, to tell them how they're doing in their business, So if their business could be a 10 as far as efficiency and optimization is concerned, where are they on the scale of 0 to 10? Because if they're on 2, they could be having a much better life, making more money and having more time off. And if they're a 9, then they really need to be thinking about, do they want to take their business to the next level? But most people don't know where they are on that scale. Yeah. So they need somebody external, somebody who doesn't get involved in the emotion or the politics of the business, who could just walk in the door and have a cold light of day, look at it. And then I would go from there based on input from people you respect and trust on how to make things better. But it also depends on what you want from the business. I've always viewed money as something that I want to make through ethical means by providing people good services and good products, so that I've made enough money so I don't have to do it anymore.
I know you've had a mentor for a long time. I know you and your partner had a mentor, and you still see them, in fact. Did they find you? Did you find them? Did you always have them around?
Introduced from left field by the last person you'd expect to ever introduce somebody of that value.
Wow.
But a lot of it is fate and destiny, isn't it? As we both know.
Yeah.
So if you're, people sort of say, well, how did you end up meeting them? And you go, well, you're not going to believe it, but I met them through and people go, really? Because you were meant to meet them.
Yeah.
So there's an element of, it's like the people that you and I watch and follow. How did we end up watching or following those people? Well, a lot of the time we've either found them ourselves or somebody else has recommended that we watch and follow them.
Yeah.
And so those, the education to be able to step back from a business and look at that business in the cold light of day. And then the real big achievement I think is for somebody to be able to look at that business in relation to the economy around it.
Well, that's the ever-moving, shifting sands, isn't it? Really, the economy around it.
But there's lots of people right now who are ticking along quite nicely, who are going to run into a lot of problems in the next 6 to 12 months, and they could be planning for those problems now. Yeah, they could be looking at how their business is going to be impacted by those problems in the next 6 to 12 months, and they could be taking steps. The biggest lesson is to learn when to let a business go. Don't remortgage your house and pour all your money into it, and then let the business go when it's eaten all your money. Sometimes businesses need to be reshaped. They need to be rescaled. Sometimes businesses need introduction of capital from an investor, or they need to, one of the things that people don't realize can be done is that it is possible for a 1 million turnover business to buy a 10 million turnover business. You know, a business can buy a business that's much bigger than it is. It doesn't need to always be accumulating smaller businesses. So merging with a bigger business or buying somebody out of another business in order to make your business stronger is one of the best ways to secure your long-term future. And there's lots of people out there who've got businesses that they set up 25, 30 years ago, and they're looking to retire, they're looking to get out. They don't want to close the business. They want some value from it. They maybe want some income from it for the next few years. And so that's another big, big angle. Attrition that way, making your business bigger and stronger that way, is a very good way of securing your future.
Yeah, I did a video about that, about buying other people's businesses and buying business. I mean, I bought my hotel, as you know, no money down, because the guy who was running it just wanted out. And because I was able to do a deal with the bank and give him what he wanted, he got all his money within 3 or 4 years. But people just don't imagine you can do that in the UK. They always think it's something you can do in the US, but not the UK. But there's, like you say, there's always business owners looking to retire, and if you can give them the terms they want, they're often a lot more flexible than you'd imagine.
Yeah, and it's not there's nothing wrong with no money down deals, but you don't have to get a business for no money down. You don't have to get a business for nothing. You can buy a business over time at its real value, and still be streets ahead. I mean, if you've got a business that's got, I'm just going to make this business up. So you've got a business got 3 employees, you've got premises and vehicles and equipment, God knows what, and then there's somebody over there who's got a business that's got 30 employees, who's turning over 10 times what you're turning over. Well, if you bought that business, you could take all of your sales with you into that business.
Yeah.
And there's probably cutbacks in that business with the 30 people that you could make. There's people that have been there for years who'd be happy to take early retirement, people with health problems, you know, and you could reduce the overall overheads, the overall staffing levels, the overall costs of the whole thing, pushed together, merged together, and end up making a lot more profit. And some of that profit you could use to buy out the owner of that existing business. So there's lots of ways to skin the cat.
Where would one even begin to start to find that sort of opportunity? Would you talk to loads of, sorry?
Competitors.
Competitors? Well, you'd look at your competitors first.
Yeah, go and talk to them. Put it this way. You're running a business. You've got 10 people work for you. You've been running it for 25 years. You're doing all right. You're mid to late 50s, maybe even early 60s. And you're thinking to yourself, is this it? And then one day the phone rings from one of your competitors. It's a competitor who runs a smaller business than you. You've nicked some business off of them over the years, and they've nicked some off of you. But that person's 20 years younger than you, and they want to come and talk to you because they're thinking about talking to you about maybe a business idea. Would you talk to them?
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go then.
It's really funny, isn't it? Because that's an area. I mean, I've come across it several times over the years, but I've never actually. It sounds scary to go bigger, but you know, because you have to. One of the things I've identified that successful people in business have is confidence, and I think that a lot of people don't have that confidence, which is why they wouldn't even attempt any of these things we're talking about. They just want to get their own little business off the ground. But I'm obviously dealing with smaller business owners than you have been, because the people you deal with have already got a business off the ground. And so it's not such a big leap from there to growing that business by buying a business.
Yeah, but it's also, if you've got somebody that can be there, if you've got somebody who can show you how to do it, if you've got somebody who's at the end of the phone constantly to help you, and, you know, you're not talking about, again, I'm not trying to push myself, but there's lots of people out there doing what I do. But if, for example, if somebody said to me, right, okay, well, look, we want you to come and look at our business, and I look at their business and I say to them, what's your competition like? You know, I can go and approach the competition and say to them, look, these people are up and coming. They are interested in talking to you about buying you out. Have you thought about retirement? And then those people might turn around and go, sling your hook, mate. Well, so what? You know,
yeah.
But the chances are they'd be interested in talking in some kind of merger. It might be a merger the other way. They might buy you out of your business. But until you ask the questions, if you go and see your competitors and knock on the door, you won't find people manning gun turrets at the entrance, waiting for you to walk around the door so they can gun you down. It's not that sort of competitor. It's just a bit of business. It's nothing major. It's not
Nothing
war.
personal.
But yeah, and a lot of the people I've worked with, having somebody at the end of the phone who's got a lot of answers to a lot of things that maybe sometimes they haven't got answers to, gives them a bit of a feeling of security and gives them another voice that they can, sound things out against. What do you think I should do about this? What do you think I should do about that? And some clients want you there, in the background, on call, as it were, ongoing. And some people, they sell their business or retire. There's all sorts of different situations. There's no one size fits all.
Okay, so going back to the topic of what people need to be wary of in the next sort of 6 months to a year, I mean, I frequently watch people on social media and they are absolutely clueless about what's going on in the world. And without wanting to be doom and gloom, I mean, you just sit there and you just think, oh my God, they're talking about things that just show that they've got no idea what's coming.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It is terrifying, isn't it?
It is terrifying, actually terrifying.
I know.
No, I mean, I think people need to look at the sector they're in. They need to look at what would happen if their sales dropped by 30% in the next 12 months. Are they prepared for things like that? How does that impact their costs, their rent, their premises, their staff? What have they got as far as support from suppliers is concerned? Where are they with their debt situation? And just assess their whole business and how strong their business is. I mean, one of the reasons that a lot of the airlines got through the pandemic was, I mean, I'm just going to use British Airways as an example. Very, very long established business, very, very profitable business for many, many years, carrying a lot of retained profits. Yeah. So if you're in a situation where you have a business that's got a pile of money in the bank and you need to ride out a storm for 2 or 3 years, then you could ride that storm out. But then the other argument is, well, do you really want to? Do you really want to sit there for 2 or 3 years and wait and use up all of the money you've in effect saved over the last 10 just to keep the business going? So, and a friend of mine said to me years ago, he said, the trouble with people is they're all carrying an oxygen cylinder, but nobody ever wants to turn it on. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, everybody wants their savings in the bank. Everybody wants their safety blanket, their safety net. He said, but no matter how much they get tortured and punished, they never want to break the seal on it. So in effect, there's no point in having it, is there? It's like having a life jacket. You fall over the edge of the boat, but you can't open the life jacket because we don't want to use it up. It's a crazy situation. So it's really a case of looking at where you are with your business and how much pain you could deal with financially and otherwise if things get complicated, if things go downhill. And you might have a very agile business, but you might have a business that's working on a high turnover, very low margin, and all of a sudden things can go very wrong. And that's the way it is in business sometimes. But the bit that I'm always trying to stop people doing is putting money into a business that isn't going to survive anyway.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you can possibly do, because in the end, you shut the business down and you have to face the fact that you should have shut it down before and not poured all your money into it.
Yeah. That was a concept I really only learned about 10 years ago, was that if a business can't stand on its own 2 feet and pay, well, you said the other time we talked, can't pay you what you invested in it, as well as paying you a salary or whatever, then you've got to seriously think about that business, because you can always lend it back to your business, but you only want to lend it back to your business if you've been able to take it out and if you still think it's worth putting an investment in. You've got to think like an investor in your own business, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's I say to people, well, if you lend me £20,000, I'll give you £1,000 a year back over the next 20 years. How does that sound? Not good, does it? It doesn't sound good.
Sorry, I wasn't able to do the maths on the fly.
That's okay. So you lend me £20,000 now,
Yeah,
and I'll
yeah,
pay you back £1,000 a year over the next 20 years. So the problem is, why would you want to lend me that money?
yeah, because I haven't had the use of the money, and it's taking a long time to get it back, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's what people do in business. They put money into a business because they think they're going to get it back. Well, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Because,
So what they should be thinking is, how can I get it back with profit quicker?
yeah, or how can I make the business work better so that I don't need to put any money into it?
Yeah.
See, working for a business and not taking any drawings is one thing, but putting money into a business is another. And it's a very scary thing. And sometimes people put money into a business because they've got a short-term problem. But then because of circumstances beyond their control, that short-term problem turns into a bit of a longer-term problem. And then because they've put money in and they don't want to lose the money they put in, they put more money in.
Sunk cost fallacy.
And then they end up in a situation where they can't not put more money in because they put so much money in, they can't possibly lose all that money. So we'll put some more money in so we don't lose the massive amount of money we put in. When actually, in hindsight, they should have not put £1 in at the start. They should have fixed the business or closed the business, because if the business can't be fixed, the business doesn't work.
Entirely the opposite to an investment strategy, where if you're fundamentally convinced of the soundness of the thing you're investing in, and it goes down suddenly, you are wise to, if you've got the spare cash, to buy more because you're getting it at a discount. But that doesn't work in business, does it? It's a different thing because the fundamentals might have changed.
Yeah, one of the things I learned in 2006 was that finding money to invest in a business is the easiest thing in the world, because there's more money than there is investable businesses.
Yeah.
So finding the money to put into a business is a piece of cake, because there's literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds waiting to be invested in businesses. The problem is finding a business to invest in. Now, what happens is, because we're all emotional, we think our business is great. We can't understand why no one will invest in it. And that's the trick. We don't understand why people won't invest in it, because it's not a good investment. So what we do is we say, well, I'll show them. So we go to the bank, raise a mortgage on the house, put the money in the business, and then spend the next 10 years trying to get back to where we are now before we put the money in the business.
There's actually really the book The E-Myth Revisited is really good.
That's an excellent book. Yeah.
The second book, which is E-Myth, E-Myth. Hang on a second.
It's not E-Myth 2, is it?
No, it isn't. It's not the E-Myth at all. I think it's Rich Dad's Guide to Investment. So the first book was Rich Dad Poor Dad, and the second book was Rich Dad's Guide to Investment. And it sounds rather dull, but actually it was all about what makes a business investable. And the last third of the book is all about how to make your business investable so that it's worth you investing time and money into it. And it was the first book I'd ever read that had come at it from that point of view, treating the business owner like an investor.
Yeah, and if you look at it from the point of view of private equity firms and other people like that, there's loads of people who have got money sitting there right now who would happily invest in a business if they know they're not going to lose their money and they know they're going to make money out of it,
make a return.
But the problem is, most businesses that want investment aren't viable businesses.
Yeah,
that's why they can't get investment.
Yeah.
But the business owners don't want to face that.
Well, okay, an hour has flown past again so quickly. What are your, I hope we're going to speak again in another month's time. What would you be your words of wisdom for business owners for the next month? What should they be thinking about for the next month?
Right, pressure test your business now. Look at where your vulnerable points are. If you've got things coming to an end, like leases on property, leases on equipment, vehicles, plant, machinery, think very, very carefully before you just automatically walk into a brand new lease, a brand new HP agreement. Just step back, look at the economy, look at inflation, look at GDP, look at where we are in the cycle of things. And there's lots of stuff that you, Nicola, can push people onto. to look at, to measure those metrics. Both you and I know the sort of things they can watch. And if you're in a situation where you're about to start a business, then get somebody like yourself to give it a quick health check. Say, right, okay, you're going to start a business. Let's see if it's going to work, shall we? Because if it can't stand up to scrutiny at this stage with somebody like you or me on a phone call, then it's not going to work in real life, is it? And the thing is that if, it's like that old adage, isn't it? The truth stands up to scrutiny. If it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, it's not the truth. So before somebody starts investing money into a business that isn't going to work, save themselves all that pain. Speaking as someone, I've been through that process. It isn't fun.
And your own time is money as well. So before you invest any time in a business, that's been my failing over the years, is I haven't valued my time enough. I've always thought, I can bung some time at that and see if it works. And really what I should have been doing was thinking, that my time is money, and before I spend any time on it, then I should be working out whether it's going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're thinking of starting a business, then see if it stands up to scrutiny. And if you've already got a business, then test it against future problems, and don't rush into any new deals now on where any new commitments, premises, staff, plant machinery, because it might be that just holding back for a few weeks or a few months could be a good idea.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming along again, and it's just gone so quickly. I can't believe it.
You're very welcome.
And we'll talk to you very soon, okay?
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I always value Greg's time so much, and he's got such a grounded, wise way of looking at things, and I'm sure you agree. We got some great comments last time, so I hope to see some great comments down below the video this time. Thanks very much for joining us, and he'll be back again in another 3 or 4 weeks' time. So do feel free to put in the comments anything you'd like him to cover specifically. As I say, he's an experienced property investor. He's an experienced business owner himself. He's got an incredibly experienced mentor himself. So it's a nice little chain of wisdom going on there. So do feel free to tap into that and let us know what you'd like us to cover. If you've got any specific business challenges you'd like Greg to tackle, or if you've got any sort of general life challenges or property challenges indeed. And in the meantime, I'll see you next time.